Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. This is my first confession in like forever. I began, my voice barely above a whisper. The Reverend's voice came through the screen, gentle yet firm, encouraging me to proceed. I was diagnosed with cancer a couple of days ago. The doctors are fairly certain that I have a high chance of survival, since it was caught early. Have faith, my child, and hope for the best, the voice from the other side of the confessional said reassuringly. I know, but I need to get my affairs in order just in case things don't go well. I paused to compose myself and narrate my story to the Father. Taking a deep breath, I began my tale. When I was 20, during my last year in college, I went camping in the woods with my friends. There were 5 of us: Chuma, Ben, Ike, Chad, and myself. We had planned this outing all year as a way to end college. Chad, the only member of our group that owned a car and lived off campus, brought his SUV early that morning, and we came down from our rooms with everything we needed and packed it all in the trunk of the vehicle. Then we entered his vehicle and began our journey to the site we picked on the map, a popular camping area we had never been to, but this was going to be our first time visiting it. We drove a couple of miles till we arrived at the area. Chad parked his car a little off the road towards the trees on the side. Then we got out, took our stuff from the trunk, and went into the forest. I had the map with me, which we used to find our way, till we eventually arrived at the location. It was a clearing with few trees and burnt out pieces of wood that littered the ground on some areas, no doubt left by previous campers, and towards the west, not far from our campsite, was a stream, a source of water for washing. We unpacked and set up our tents. Before then, Ike and I went to get some firewood, while the others went to hunt. Though we brought some food with us, but the idea of hunting was one that Chad and Chuma liked. Hence, their attempt at hunting some wild game, which they succeeded at. The 3 of them caught some rabbits, which they must have watched YouTube to learn how to skin, because when I returned with Ike, the meat we saw them handle still had some skin and fur on it. The firewood was laid on the ground and set alight with matches I brought along, and the rabbits were skewered with sticks and placed near the fire to roast. Later, as the sun was setting and we sat around the fire watching the meats roast, we started talking about our futures and what we hoped to achieve. As we talked, Chad, who occasionally checked the rabbits for readiness, suggested a way to ensure that we all succeeded in our respective endeavors. Do you guys believe in the supernatural? He asked in hushed tones, as if he didn't want non-existent outsiders to hear. An odd question it was. Looking at him with puzzled expression, I replied, "You mean like ghosts and witches?" No. I mean things like spirits, demons," he said. The others had a worried look and confusion written on their faces. "What are you on about, Chad?" Ike asked. Chad lowered his head, and in a more hushed tone that was almost a whisper, he said, "You guys know how the country and the economy is. There is no guarantee that we would land good paying jobs soon, or any job at all. Perhaps we could get something to manipulate our chance of success in life in a favorable way. He then reached out into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper and spread it out. "Come closer and see this," he said. Then got up and huddled around him to what he wanted to show us. The paper had strange symbols drawn on it, with writings that were in his handwriting. "What is this?" I asked, though I suspected what it was. "A summoning ritual to summon a demon," Chad replied. The rest of us withdrew from him, repelled by what he said. "Dude, that's some devil shit you got there," Chuma said with terror in his voice. "Calm down, bro. I understand your concerns, but I can guarantee you that this is safe." We were hesitant at first, but Chad had a way of convincing people to do things they didn't want to, and he convinced us. We waited till it was midnight to commence the ritual, which involved drawing a large circle on the ground around the fire and drawing small symbols within the circle. Then we each took turns cutting our hands with a knife. We passed from one person to the other. Then we held our hands over the fire and allowed the blood to drop into the flames. We stepped out of the large circle and stood around it, equal distances from each other, and began chanting the incantation we read on the piece of paper. As we chanted, a strong wind began to blow, swaying the trees around us and rustling their leaves. Dry leaves and twigs were lifted by the wind, which carried them like a whirlwind into the flame that turned red, and the circle which we drew around the fire began to glow a soft golden glow. Thick smoke bellowed out of the flames, which slowly condensed into a solid humanoid form. A solid humanoid form that was tall, with two large horns on its head. The demon's skin was black like coals, and it had powerful arms that ended with clawed hands. It glared at us with flaming red eyes. The sight frightened me, and I almost choked on the words that I had to speak to bind the demon. In unison we spoke, "Eligos, we bind you by the powers of hell." The demon laughed.
"You stupid sacks of flesh, blood, and bones. Who told you that I am Eligos?"
"Chad, is this supposed to happen?" Ben fearfully said. I could hear Chuma, who was to my right, whimper. Wings of fire and smoke sprouted out of the demon's back, and a tail that looked like a giant scorpion tail with a stinger at the tip. The tail launched at Chad, stinging him in his chest. His body swelled and he collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain. I tried to run, but realized I was rooted to the ground, literally. Roots had sprouted from my feet and anchored me to the ground, making it impossible to move. The others, who were now screaming and getting viciously attacked by the demon who had leapt out of the fire, were also unable to move for the same reason. I waited helplessly to meet the same fate as my friends, who now lay lifeless and mutilated on the ground after the demon was done with them. It then walked slowly towards me and lowered its head to my level. It smelled like burning flesh and its eyes radiated heat. It sniffed me deeply, then smiled and backed away from me. I hadn't noticed it before, but the lower half of the evil spirit was the hindquarters of a goat. But instead of hooves, its legs ended in powerful talons with large curved claws. Then the demon collapsed into a swarm of insects and flew away into the night. I was so shocked and traumatized by what I had witnessed that I didn't realize that my feet were now free from the ground. Chad, Chuma, Ben, Ike were gone, lying dead and torn to pieces. I don't know how long I remained standing, but eventually I fell to the ground and cried loudly. Then I got up and walked to Chad's tent to get his car key and ran to the place the car was parked. I got in, drove down to the nearest police station and reported the incident. Of course, they didn't believe me and attributed what I had told them to shock. A wild animal attack was the official report that was put on record. It has been 35 years since this happened, and I don't know why the demon spared my life, I said to the father. Then came laughter, which was menacing, and a familiar terrible voice that spoke from the demarcating screen of the confessional.
Because I could smell the cancer that now ravages you, you rotten sack of meat.